Okay, so chapter 6 ends with two things. One is, remember, inventory is an asset account, and so it's going to be presented on the balance sheet. It's a current asset. So there's a couple of things you need to know about its presentation. And the second thing we're going to do in this part of the chapter is we're going to learn a little financial analysis. There's two more ratios that they introduce you to. Okay. So first things first, like I said, inventory is a current asset account. And whether the company names the account inventory or merchandise inventory, it doesn't really matter. It's still the same. It's going to show up on the balance sheet. And because it's going to show on the balance sheet, one thing that GAAP is very clear on is that we're not supposed to overvalue what our assets are really worth. Okay. And inventory is one of those assets that even though we bought them at a certain price, at a certain cost to us, over time that might change. So if we went and bought them again, it might be a different price. So for example, if I have a bunch of hats, because I sell hats, I'm part of Lids or whatever they're calling themselves. I buy a whole bunch of hats at $10. Those are my cost for those hats. And I go out and I buy more hats, but now those are $11. That cost me $11. Well, normally speaking, that would be the value of my inventory, whatever I paid for. But when I'm actually putting them on the balance sheet, we actually have to ask the question, what's the real value of those hats? Is it the $11 I just paid for those hats? Or is it the $10 that I paid for those before? So we have to go through a question of, do we actually list the cost, which is tradition, listing the cost of the assets on the balance sheet is a tradition, but sometimes that can overstate the asset. And so we're going to be learning about something called a lower of cost or market basis, because we want to be conservative in how we value those assets. Companies are also supposed to list the type of cost method they use, FIFO, LIFO, average cost, to get the value of the inventory and also to show how they got the value for cost of goods sold. Companies need to list this on their annual report. Here's an annual report, a part of it from Walmart. This is a note to the financial statements, right? It's part of that annual report. Walmart's an international company. And so here what they do, first of all, they tell you for their US stores, for their US inventory, they use LIFO. They use the last in, first out method as their cost. However, they are international as well. They have stores around the world. And though that particular, for those stores, they use the FIFO method. Okay. So they would actually have to list specifically what they used. Okay. And again, very specifically here, the company's inventory are valued at LIFO. Okay. So they have to show that. They also have to show if they listed at cost or they used the lower of cost or market basis to come up with that value. So let's talk about that lower cost of market basis. It's actually very simple, very, very simple. They went out and they bought inventory and and they paid a certain amount of money for that inventory. That's their cost. However, if they went to replace that inventory right now, as they were doing their balance sheet, would the inventory cost the same or would the price change? In other words, would the market change? If they replaced it, would it be higher or lower than their original cost? One thing that accounting and GAAP really emphasizes is you never ever want to overstate the value of your assets. You want to be conservative in those numbers. And so, although traditionally we list assets at their cost, to be conservative, right, conservatism, we will use the lower of either the cost of what we paid or the market value, which is the replacement cost. We simply pick the lower of those two to value our inventory. So here's an example. Welcome to Kentucky TV. I'm Kentucky. We got lots of merchandise here. We got some flat screen TVs. We got 100 of them. When we bought them, the cost to us was $600 each. But as you see, the market value, if we went and replaced them, all new inventory, those televisions would be $550. So this is your choice. You pick simply the lower of the two numbers to value each item of inventory. So these 100 TVs will be valued at the lower, okay, of cost or market, which in this case is market. So the value of that inventory is $55,000. Satellite, we got some satellite radios, got 500 of them. We paid $90, but if we replace them, the market would be 104. So obviously we're going to use the 90, right? Because it's the lower of the two. So those radios would be valued at 45. We got some Blu-ray players, lots of them actually. We paid $50 for them at cost, but if we replace them today, be 48. We're going to use the 48 because it's the lower of the two to value those. And we got way too many CDs, 3,000. Paid $5 for them. If we replace them, beat $6. So $15,000 is the lower, 3,000 times the 5. So this would be the value of the inventory on the balance sheet under the lower of cost or market system. It's relatively straightforward. You're looking at your inventory and what you actually paid for it. That's the cost. If you were to go ahead and replace it today, what would be the market or replacement cost, which is the market? And you're simply picking the lower of those two numbers to give a value to your inventory, okay? So again, this is for the asset. Your do it exercise number 3 on the lower of cost or market basis gives you another company. They're selling home heating stoves, gas, wood, and pellet stoves. They have the cost in this column. They have the market in this column. It's a total on both sides. So you'd simply pick the lower of the two, right? The 79,000 is the lower for the gas stoves. The pellet stoves would be the 250. I'm sorry, the wood stoves would be 250. The pellet stoves would be the 101. You simply add those up, and that would be the value of their inventory, right? Determine the value of the company's inventory under the lower of cost or market approach. It would be $430. So I don't anticipate this is going to take you a long time to figure this out. So that's part 1 of the 2 things that we're going to need to know about learning objective 3. The next one is about some financial analysis, some ratio analysis. Inventory is super important because it's the only reason retail and merchandising stores exist. They exist to sell their goods. So if you actually have a particular skill in inventory management and you're really, really good at it, you're going to have lots of awesome job opportunities because they really need people who are good with inventory management. You have, in essence, listing the extremes, right? What happens if you buy too much inventory, you have a high inventory level? Well, assumingly, when you bought them, you were expecting to get a certain price for them from the customer. So if I bought those $10 hats, I was expecting to get $30 from the customer for those hats. That's what I had in mind. But what happens if I just simply have too many hats lying around? Well, that's a problem, right? Well, first of all, I have to store those hats, so that's going to be storage. I might have needed to extend my repayment um, to the manufacturer for those hats. I might have interest costs, and of course, those hats could basically get too old for me to sell for $30. At high inventory levels, oftentimes I'm going to lower my price. So I'm not getting $30 for my hats. I might need to get $20. I might need to get 15. I might even need to get 10. At which case, at any time that I have to keep lowering my prices because my inventory is high, I'm not making any money, right? The price changed, which is my revenue. My revenue has changed. My revenue is going to be lower, but my cost of goods sold hasn't changed, which is a very important expense that's listed first. I still got to pay people. I still got to pay my rent. I still got to pay all this other stuff. Nothing else has really changed other than the fact I have less revenue. So higher and higher inventory levels cause a problem because you can't sell at the price you wanted. And the only way to get rid of them is to keep lowering your price, which means you're not making any money on them. In the case of a technical good, sometimes if you keep them too long, they become obsolete. There's a new item in stock. Everybody wants that new item. No one wants the older one. Okay. So you got to have just the right inventory. The other problem is you walk in and they don't have any. They might have advertised that this was for sale this week or this is what they had, and you walk in and they just don't have any. You've probably been through that situation in your life. It is so frustrating on the part of the customer, right? It's yet equally frustrating to the merchandiser because they have a customer who's willing to buy stuff from them. They just don't have the stuff. Right? So that means a lost sale. If there's a lost sale, there's no revenue. There's no revenue, there's no profit. So this is exceptionally frustrating on both ends. Low inventory levels are not good because again, the purpose of retail is to have enough inventory to keep selling it. Right? When you run out of other things. So we look at something called an inventory turnover ratio. This is the main ratio that we're going to be looking at here. And it basically tells us the word turnover is really about, in this case, how frequently are we selling our inventory in the sense of how many times per year are we updating our inventory. So to figure that out, we look at the cost of goods sold for that year, and we divide that over the average inventory. That's your beginning and ending inventory added together divided by 2. That's your average inventory. Okay. Once we know the inventory turnover ratio, we can put that under 365, and it converts it to a number of days that it's been inventories on your shelves before it's sold and needs to be replaced. So let's take a look at examples here. This is Walmart data from 2013 and 2014. The very first thing that we calculate is inventory turnover. And again, we're going to look at 2014. So the top number is the cost of goods sold. So 358,069 is the cost of goods sold. The bottom number, the denominator, is the beginning and ending inventories averaged together. So look, the ending inventory for 2013 is the beginning inventory for 2014. Okay. So this and this are added together and divided by 2. Now look at Walmart. Walmart's sitting at 8.1 times a year. What does that mean? Well, technically speaking, and Walmart's a large store. It's got over 120 plus thousand different items in there. So all that inventory. This means, if you can picture it in your head, Walmart sells all of those items in the store and needs to restock the store 8 times every year. Okay. Now, again, knowing how big Walmart is, you can see that it's just, and the number of products they have, you can see that inventory management is critically important to the success of this operation. And particularly when you're selling out your store 8 times a year, you're busy. Well, now that you know that's 8.1, you put that below 365, and it calculates how many days. In this case, Walmart, technically, if you look at it, it means that Walmart sells out their stores in full every 45 days. Okay. Of course, no store waits until the last product is gone. It's like, okay, the shelves are empty, back up the truck. They're always restocking the shelves. This is just gives you an idea as if they actually did that. This would be like every 45 days, Walmart's wiped out. They have to restock 8 times a year. That's just an incredible number of times that you are turning over your inventory. Look at Target for the exact same. Now, Target's a small competitor to Walmart. Target's only about maybe 20% the size of Walmart. So if Walmart was a 10-foot tall person, Target would be 2 feet tall next to him. Or if you can't picture a 10-foot person, well, picture a 5-foot person, and Target would be only 1 foot tall. So next to that person. So Walmart is gigantic, and Target is a good size, but really tiny compared to Walmart. Okay, it's not even a mini-me size. Okay, it's even smaller than that. Inventory turnover 6 times per year. Again, when you think about it, this is Target is selling out all the inventory in their stores and needing to restock their stores 6 times per year. When you put that under 365, it comes out to roughly every 60 days. 59.8 days is about 60 days. And so this is, it's a smaller turnover, but still 6 times a year, you're moving a lot of product. Target stores are not small either. They're quite large. They're also moving lots of product. Obviously Walmart's moving more, faster, but Target's moving their share. The industry as a whole, when you look at all of these large retailers, so throw, Kohl's and other in there, maybe a Kmart or other stuff. When you look at all of those large retail department stores, they're hoofing it. They're turning over inventory 8.4 times a year, roughly every 43.5 days. Those stores are cleared out and need to be restocked. So we depend on these stores. A lot of us go shopping at these types of stores for, food and personal products and other types of things. And, it shows in the inventory turnover how quickly they need to turn over this inventory and keep on track. Okay, and the last thing we're going to look at here is simply the do it exercise for the inventory turnover. Here we're looking at numbers for 2016 and 2017 for this company called Westmoreland. Now they switched to something called a just-in-time inventory system, which basically means they're not going to have a lot of product sort of in the back room in storage. They're going to minimize that. They're going to just keep it to a minimum. They have information here about sales, cost of goods sold, and inventory amounts. We don't really care about sales for inventory turnover, right? Because sales are not part of the formula. The formula is cost of goods sold divided by the average inventory, right? Which is beginning plus ending divided by 2. So for 2016, you have cost of goods sold of $1 million. You have average inventory would be about 250, right? So 290 plus 210 divided by 2, we give you 250. So the inventory turnover for 2016, as you see, is 4 times per year. When you divide 365 by 4, you get about 91 days. So roughly every 3 months, Westmoreland is clearing the shelves, right? Well, in 2017, they switched to just in time, which means they have much less inventory in the store because they're ordering it sort of as an as needed basis to some degree. So even though they start with a lot, again, the ending inventory for 1 year is the beginning inventory for another year. That's what I was telling you the other time. So when you average these two numbers, it clearly is 130,000, much, much less. You have 910,000 in costs. So now you've increased your inventory turnover rate 7 times. So you're moving that inventory much more quickly. You're not keeping it very much. And when you divide that by 365, you're clearing out your store every 52 days rather than every 91 days, which is better for you. So that is the rest of chapter 6. It's again the two main things: lower of cost or market as a basis for valuing inventory, and those two new financial ratios that you've learned. Questions?